You can collect a lot of different data about people. And while you're designing your study, there might be some pieces of information that you never thought to acquire. In this video, I'll give you a selection of different types of information that you can get from your respondents when you're doing a research project. I'll discuss 7 types of data that you could collect about your respondents: demographic, psychographic, behavioral, knowledge awareness, motivations, intentions, and physical. Probably the most popular form of data in social research is demographic data. It's almost easier to give examples of what demographic data is than to define it sharply. But here's my attempt at an explanation. In society, we have conventional ways of dividing up people. We divide them by sex, we divide them by race, we divide them between rich and poor, that'd be income and wealth. We divide them by levels of education, by their ages and birth cohorts, and a whole bunch of other things. Demographic data is a shorthand for sort of the conventional dividing lines or groupings that we use to put people into categories when we're discussing politics, economics, or social issues. Here's some examples of demographic data you might consider collecting in your study. It's hard to make an exhaustive list of all the demographic data that you could conceivably collect, but these are some popular ones. When we look at variables like race, ethnicity, sex, heritage, sexual orientation, geographic region, and so on, what we're thinking is that these categories divide people into groups with distinct backgrounds or worldviews or positions in society that will affect their life experiences, their thoughts, their behaviors, or whatever it is that we're trying to explain in our research project. In general, it's a good idea to collect a lot of demographic information when you're conducting social research. First of all, it's often very important. The fact that society divides people into different groups and treats them differently means that those groups are probably going to delineate people with different experiences or beliefs, life's chances, and so on. But even if demographic information isn't really relevant to the phenomenon that you're trying to explain, and it often is relevant, people are going to want to know about it. They're going to ask, well, are your findings applicable across races, across income groups, across sexes or sexuality, and so on? So collect a lot of demographic information when you conduct research. A second, less conventional type of data to collect about your respondents is psychographic data. Psychographic data tries to sort people by their personality types. It's very popular in marketing research, but it's also used in social research when we try to tap into people's culture, their values, their beliefs. We use psychographic data because sometimes personality types are just as strong as demographic factors, and personality types can cut across demographic lines. So, for example, a black conservative and a white conservative might have a lot of similarity in certain respects that those two groups don't share with people who have the same race, but have the opposite political views. Likewise, a Hispanic Star Trek nerd and a Asian Star Trek nerd might really have a lot of the same perspectives or values that aren't shared by people of their race, or rather their ethnicity. We often describe psychographics in terms of people's AIOs, their activities, interests, and opinions. Activities are things that people do. Interests are things about which people care or to which they pay attention. And opinions are people's normative judgments or subjective valuations of things. Basically what they see as good or bad, desirable or undesirable, sacred or profane. Your goal in collecting this type of information is to group people into categories or make inferences about their broader mental states. A third type of information that you could collect about your subjects are awareness and knowledge information. Awareness information is concerned with whether or not your subjects have been exposed to a particular piece of information. For example, you might be a health researcher and you might want to know which parts of the population know that AIDS transmission can be prevented by condom use. Or maybe you're a marketer who's trying to sell a new magazine and you want to know who's heard of your magazine and who hasn't, so you know who to advertise to. Knowledge questions are like awareness questions in that they're dealing with the types of information to which your subjects have access. Knowledge questions are more concerned with people's command of a particular piece of information or a particular skill set. So, for example, in questions about political awareness, researchers might want to know who has a better command or understanding of America's political system, and might ask questions like, what does the Second Amendment cover? Or who's the Speaker in the House of Representatives? These types of information can be useful for studies where you think that the phenomena that you're tackling or the social problem that you're trying to engage is dependent on what people do or do not know. Another type of data that researchers often collect concern motivations. Motivations look for the deep psychological drivers that make us do what we do or want what we want. In a way, asking questions about motivations isn't all that different from asking psychographic questions. We're asking people what they see as desirable, what they're interested in, and what they pursue. The reason that it's worth separating out motivation questions is that a lot of social theories are premised on the idea that people are motivated by particular drives, the drive for power, the drive for money, the drive for social acceptance. And if we want to test these theories, then we might want to tap into those motivations and see if our subjects are actually motivated by the things that theories assume. Now, there are tons of different motivational theories. I'm sure you've all learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in some class. And there's a ton of other ways of categorizing all the things that drive us. One of my favorites is an old run from a psychologist named Henry Murray, who basically just drew up a massive list of different types of needs that might drive people. Here are some examples. So, for example, Henry Murray thought that we were driven by the need to acquire, an acquisitional need to obtain things or to gain achievement, to overcome challenging feats. We also are said to have a psychogenic, a motivational need for aggression. We want to take out our frustrations on other people. Infavoidance is the motive to avoid humiliation. Exposition, the need to explain things to others. This isn't an exhaustive list. Murray came up with a huge list. And what I like about Murray's categorization is that he basically just gives you a huge menu of potential motives to choose from when you're conducting your own research. Questions about intentions are concerned with what the respondents think that they will do in the future. For example, marketers or businesses might use questions like, do you plan to buy a car in 6 months, to know who to send advertisements to or who to target in an advertising campaign. You can also use it in social research, like, for example, do you plan to commit suicide? Do you plan to vote in the upcoming elections? The problem with intentions is that what people think that they're going to do in the future might be different from what they actually do. Anybody who's ever made a resolution to exercise in the new year knows that very well. Another common question are questions about behavior. Those are things that are questions about what you do on a regular basis. Questions about behavior are very useful because they allow us to make judgments about how people are instead of how they think they are. You might ask me, well, is health important to me? Is eating right important to me? And I could say, oh yes, they're very, very important. But if you were to ask me, how often do you visit the gym? How often do you eat salad? You might get a very, very different answer. And the difference between what I say is important to me, and what I do is the difference between what the world as it exists in my mind and my day-to-day life, and how my regular practice reflects my priorities. A final really interesting type of data that you can collect on people is their physical data. I actually was part of a study like this when I was in grad school. Somebody showed me a bunch of pictures and took MRIs of me. I was really desperate. I needed the $20 in grad school. But what they were doing was they were looking at my body's reaction to certain types of stimuli. Another common method of testing people's physical responses is an eye camera in internet research. What an eye camera does is it watches where people are looking on a computer screen in an effort to see which types of advertisements can draw your attention, or in an effort to see which types of computer designs are better for people with certain disabilities or something like that. Physical responses are fantastic because they give us the opportunity to capture responses from the subjects that aren't even available to their cognitive mind. Their body might tell us one thing. Are they stressed? Are they interested? Are they aroused? Which is completely different from what their minds think is their level of stress, arousal, or interest. So those are 7 types of information that you might consider collecting about your subjects in your research project. This isn't an exhaustive list. It isn't the way to classify all possible types of data. It's more like 7 things to put on your to think about checklist. Did you include demographic data? You almost always should. Is psychographic data, personality types, personal views, activities, is that relevant to explaining the phenomenon that I'm trying to explain? Should I look at behavioral stuff, how people act on a regular basis, not how they say they act? Knowledge and awareness, what people know, what people don't know, how well they know it. Motivations, what drives them to do what they do. Intentions, what are their future plans. And physical, how their body reacts in non-conscious ways to certain stimuli.